She slid the cardboard box across the porch with her foot. The way you move something, you don't want your hands to remember. And she said it, like she was doing me a favor. You'll want to be out by Friday, honey. 4 years I had lived in that house. 4 years I fed, bathed, medicated, and finally buried a woman while the rest of them mailed flowers and signed the cards in the car. My name was on a care agreement for $73,950 that no one ever paid me. And my name had been quietly erased from a will that was rewritten, while my grandmother lay in a hospital bed, too far gone to say my name out loud. That morning, I drove away with a box, a blue notebook, and $41 in my checking account. Today, I read the books of the dead for a living. I am a forensic accountant. That means when someone robs a dying person and hides it in the paperwork, I am the one who goes through the numbers, line by line, until the lie can't stand up anymore. I catch them. Last spring, for the first time, I sat down and read the books they had been keeping on me. My name is Claire. I am 41 years old. And if you have ever been the person the whole family leaned on and then counted as nothing, the one who showed up, who stayed, who wiped the chin and changed the sheets while everyone else couldn't get away from work, then you already know the sound the rest of this makes. Stay with me. I am going to tell it slow, and all the way to the end, the way it actually happened, because the most honest thing in that entire house turned out to be a 99-cent notebook. And it is the reason a courtroom eventually believed me over a woman who had a lawyer, a notary, and my whole family on her side. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the earliest part that matters. Everything I tell you from here moves forward toward that morning on the porch, and then past it. Keep the porch in your head. I'll call it that morning every time, so you never lose your place. 4 years and 3 months before that morning, I moved into my grandmother's house on Delrose Avenue in Dayton, Ohio. Her name was Ada. To me, she was always Nana. She had a small brick house with a hummingbird feeder in the kitchen window and a tin of butterscotch candies on the counter that she refilled like it was a religious duty. My mother, Nana's daughter, had died the winter before. Fast. A stroke at 58, and something in me couldn't stand the idea of Nana rattling around that house alone, with a heart that skipped and a memory that had started to skip too. So I gave up my apartment and my second job, and I moved into the back bedroom. I was 37. I told myself it was for a year, if you have ever moved in just for a while. To help someone you love, you know how the year does not stay a year. The first months were good. Honestly, Nana knew me. We had a rhythm. Pills at 8 a.m., the game shows at noon, the hummingbirds in the afternoon. I kept a notebook by the toaster, a plain blue spiral notebook, the kind you buy 3 for $1 in August. And I wrote everything in it. Blood pressure, which pills, what time, good days, bad days. The afternoon she forgot my mother was gone, and I had to tell her all over again, and we both cried at the kitchen table. And then she offered me a butterscotch, like that would fix it. I wrote that down too. That notebook was nothing. It was a chore list. Remember that it was nothing. It matters later that it started as nothing. 3 months, and some after I moved in. Call it 4 years before that morning. My aunt came back into the picture, Sylvia. My mother's younger sister. Sylvia lived across town, drove a clean car, and had a way of arriving with a folder and a plan. She loved Nana. I want to be fair. I think, in her own way. She did, but Sylvia loved Nana the way an accountant loves an asset. And I say that as a woman who is now, professionally, an accountant. Sylvia sat me down at the kitchen table one evening, moved the butterscotch tin aside, and laid out a document, a personal care agreement. That is a real thing. It is a contract that says a family member is being hired to give care. So it is on the books. So it is fair. So, and she said this part looking right at me. So you are protected, Claire. The agreement said I would be paid $1,450 a month to care for Nana full-time. She had already had a lawyer draw it up. She had already signed as Nana's financial power of attorney. That is the person legally allowed to move someone else's money when that someone can't. She slid the pen across the table. I want you to hear how reasonable it sounded. I was giving up income to be there. $1,450 a month was less than half what an agency would charge for the same care. And Sylvia said, it just like that, like she was doing, right by me. This is what Nana wanted, she said, for you to be taken care of. For taking care of her, I signed. Of course, I signed. Here is the part that turns. The first payment was supposed to come the first of the next month. It didn't. When I asked, Sylvia said the accounts were mid-transfer. It is a whole thing with the bank, next month. Next month it was I don't want to move money while your grandmother's Medicaid eligibility is being reviewed. We have to be careful. There was always a reason, and every reason sounded like she was protecting me. I kept caring for Nana. The payments never started, not once. In 51 months, did $1 of that agreement land in my account. Write that number down. 51 months. Because at the end, a stranger in a black robe is going to do the math out loud. And it is going to matter that it was every single month. But I didn't know any of that yet. I trusted her. She was family. If you've ever kept working on a promise because the person holding the checkbook was your own blood, then you know, I am not telling you I was stupid. I am telling you, I was loyal. They are not the same thing. And the difference is the whole story. About 2 years before that morning, things sharpened. Nana's heart got worse, and her memory got much worse. And that meant more money moving, more decisions, more paperwork. Which meant more Sylvia. She got a durable financial power of attorney formalized. The strong kind. The kind that lets you do nearly anything with another person's money. She moved Nana's checking and savings to a bank where she had a relationship. She started what the paperwork would later politely call management. I noticed small things, the way you notice a draft before you find the crack. A locked drawer in the hall desk that had never been locked. A bank statement I used to see on the counter that stopped appearing. One afternoon I asked Sylvia, gently, about my care payments. I was behind on my own car insurance by then. And she looked at me with real warmth and real pity and said, Claire, the accounts are complicated right now. You don't want to be the kind of person who nickel and dimes a dying woman. And just like that, I was the one who should be ashamed for asking to be paid what a contract said I was owed. That is the villain in these stories, by the way. And I need you to see her clearly because she is not a cartoon. Sylvia never raised her voice. Sylvia never called me a name. Sylvia was concerned. Sylvia was practical. Sylvia had a folder. Everything cruel she ever did to me, she did calmly and in writing. And she did it while telling me it was for my own good and for Nana's. That is what makes this kind of person dangerous. You cannot point at a moment where she screamed, because there isn't one. You can only, if you are careful, point at the paper, so I got careful. I kept writing in the blue notebook. By now, it wasn't one notebook. It was the third one. And the front of each said the year in marker. I wrote the doctor visits. The days Nana knew me and the days she didn't. The medications and the doses and the times. I wasn't building a case. I want to be honest about that. I wasn't clever. I wasn't planning anything. I was a tired woman writing down when her grandmother took her heart pills, so she wouldn't double dose her by accident at 3 in the morning. You already know what a house sounds like at 3 in the morning. When someone in it is dying, there is a lot of time in that quiet. I filled it with a pen. About a year and a half before that morning, I found the first hard thing I couldn't explain away. Nana had a long-term care insurance policy. Let me tell you in plain words what that is. Because it turns out to be the whole point. It is a policy an older person pays into for years, so that if they ever need daily care, the insurance company to cover it. A daily benefit. In Nana's case, $160 a day. Meant for exactly the kind of around-the-clock care I was giving her for free, and those checks came. I know they came, because one afternoon, I saw one sitting on the kitchen counter. A real check from the insurance company made out to Nana's account before it went into the locked drawer with everything else. Sit with the shape of that. For a second, the care I was giving was being reimbursed. Money was arriving, on purpose, month after month, to pay for the exact hours I was working. It just wasn't arriving to me. I was being told there was no money for my care agreement, over and over, while the mail brought a check every month for the very care I was doing. I didn't understand yet how completely those two facts fit together. I just wrote down, in the blue notebook, the date I saw the check and the amount printed on it, because by then writing things down was the only power I had. And I didn't even know it was power. Keep that check in mind. It comes back, in her own handwriting, at the very end. Around this time, Sylvia's daughter started coming by more. My cousin Bree. She was younger than me, in her 20s, quieter than her mother, and she'd sit with Nana and hold her hand and not say much. Bree saw me. That is all I'll say for now. She saw what I did in that house, and she saw who wasn't there, and she didn't have the power to change any of it. Keep her in your head too, gently. She is the one thread I get to keep. 10 months before that morning, the floor dropped. Nana had a bad fall and a bad stretch in the hospital. And after that, she was never really all the way back. There were days she was non-verbal, awake, but not there, not able to speak. I logged those days, like I logged everything. There is an entry in the third notebook, a Tuesday, where I wrote, in my own tired handwriting, that Nana did not know my name that day, could not speak, spent the afternoon in and out at the hospital. I wrote it, because I always wrote it. I did not know, could not have known, that 3 miles away, that same Tuesday afternoon, a lawyer's office was preparing a document that said my grandmother was of sound mind and clear intention, and was, that very day, changing her entire estate. Sit with that for a second, because it is the hinge the whole thing turns on. 2 pieces of paper, same date, one written by a woman who was in the room, one written by people who were not. I'll come back to that Tuesday. It is the day everything I did without meaning to came due, somewhere in that last stretch. The one good stranger arrived. Her name was Ruth. She was the hospice nurse, 60-something, hands like she'd worked a farm. And she'd been doing this longer than I'd been alive. Ruth didn't try to fix me, and she didn't tell me it would be okay. because she knew it wouldn't. She just showed up on schedule and did the hard things without flinching and let me talk. One night, near the end, I was at the kitchen table, writing in the notebook and half apologizing for it, saying I didn't even know why I still bothered writing it all down. And Ruth looked at me and said the thing I have carried every day since. She said, "Honey, when this is over, they are going to tell a story about who she was and who you were, and the ones who weren't here will tell it the loudest. Paper is the only thing in this house that was actually here. Keep your paper. Keep your paper." I didn't understand yet how completely she was right. I thought she meant it kindly, like a memory-keeping thing. She meant it like a woman who had watched this exact robbery happen at 50 deathbeds and knew what was coming for me. Remember Ruth. I remember Ruth every single day. 6 weeks before that morning, Sylvia started talking about after, not grief. Logistics. She started saying things about the house, that Delrose was a lot to keep up, that the family would need to make some decisions, that it might be best to get it ready to sell. She said it over Nana's sleeping body. She said, more than once, "This is what Nana would want, Claire. She wouldn't want us fighting over a house." And I remember thinking, we're not fighting, and no one's mentioned me staying or going. And why does she keep saying, "We about a house I am the only one living in"? Then, about 3 weeks before that morning, while Nana was still alive, still in the back bedroom, still breathing, Sylvia brought a realtor through the house. I came in from the pharmacy, and there was a stranger in a blazer measuring the living room with a little laser tool, and Sylvia walking him toward the kitchen, saying the light in here was really the selling feature. Nana was asleep 40 feet away. I stood in the doorway with the paper bag of heart medication in my arms. And I did not say one word. I want you to understand what calm cruelty actually looks like. Because it never looks like the movies. It is not a raised voice. It is a tape measure in a dying woman's living room and a smile that tells you she is only being practical. I wrote it in the notebook that night. The date, the time, the realtor's first name. I told myself I was only keeping busy. I was keeping a record. And some animal part of me already knew I was going to need it. If you've ever felt a decision being made about your life in a room where no one is asking you anything, you felt what I felt in those 6 weeks. I said nothing. I want you to notice that. I said nothing. And I kept writing everything down. Now we're at the porch. Now we're at that morning. Nana died on a Sunday night in early spring. At home, with me holding one hand, and Ruth checking her pulse, and Bree crying in the doorway. Sylvia was not there. She arrived 20 minutes after, took charge of the phone calls, and was everyone agreed. So strong for the family. The funeral was that Friday. And the morning after the funeral, Saturday, 6:40 a.m., before I'd even had coffee. A car pulled into the driveway on Delrose. It was Sylvia. She had a cardboard box in her arms, already packed, my things. The ones from the back bedroom, folded neat by someone who had let herself in at some point. When I wasn't looking, she set it on the porch. She slid it toward me with her foot. And she said, in that same warm, sorry, reasonable voice, "The house is under contract. Honey, it closes in 3 weeks. You'll want to be out by Friday. This is what Nana wanted. Let's not make it ugly. Under contract. It closes in 3 weeks." My grandmother had been dead 6 days. She handed me a manila folder, some things you should have. And I opened it on the porch with the box at my feet. Inside was a copy of a document I had never seen, a trust amendment. The last one, dated that Tuesday, 10 months before, the Tuesday Nana didn't know my name. In it, the house on Delrose and nearly everything else went to Sylvia to distribute at her discretion. And my name. I'd been named to receive the house in an earlier version. It turned out, though I didn't know that yet either, my name was simply gone, erased and replaced by a phrase. At her discretion. I was somebody's discretion now. I did not scream. I want you to know that, because it is the last time I'll ask you to notice me not screaming, and it is the truest thing I can tell you about that morning. I looked at the date on that amendment, and some cold, quiet part of me, the part that would eventually become very good at my job, thought, I have that date written down somewhere. I know what happened on that Tuesday. I was in the room. On that Tuesday, I picked up the box. On top of it, I put the blue notebooks, all 3, and I reached back through the door and took Nana's tin of butterscotch off the counter. Because I could not stand to leave it for whoever bought the house. I put the tin in the box. I got in my car. I had $41 in my account. And no idea where I was going. I drove to the parking lot of the grocery store where I used to buy Nana's butterscotch. And I sat there and read the amendment again. Slower. The date at the top kept catching me. That Tuesday. I couldn't have told you yet why it snagged so hard. I just knew it the way you know a note is flat before you can name which one. That I had lived through that Tuesday. That I had stood in a hospital hallway on that Tuesday. And that whatever this piece of paper claimed had happened that afternoon, I had my own account of it. Somewhere. In a box in my back seat. I didn't chase it. I was too tired and too broke to chase anything. I just filed it away. The way you file a splinter too deep to reach yet. It took me almost 4 years to reach it. If you've ever driven away from a house you gave years of your life to, carrying everything you have left in one box, and you didn't cry because you were afraid that if you started you would drive into a bridge abutment. Comment the word counted below. Just that one word. I read them. I read everyone. Because for a long time, nobody read me. I didn't cry that morning. I want to be exact with you about the crying, because I only did it once in this whole story. And it wasn't then. That morning, I felt nothing but a low, clean hum. Like a wire pulled tight. The crying came almost 4 years later, alone. At a different kitchen table, over that same blue notebook. I'll get you there. I promise. I'll get you there. Let me move forward fast now, past the survival years, because you already know I survived. I am here. And the interesting part was never the surviving. It was what the surviving turned me into. The first winter after that morning, I slept on Ruth's fold-out couch. For 6 weeks, that hospice nurse who told me to keep my paper handed me the couch, too. And never once made me feel it. I got a bookkeeping job at a heating and cooling company, $31,000 a year, doing the invoices, and I was good at it in a way that surprised me. Numbers were clean. Numbers didn't say, this is what Nana wanted, and then do the opposite. A ledger either balances or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, someone is lying. And the numbers will always, eventually, tell you where. By the 2nd year after that morning, I'd figured out what I wanted to become. I went back to school at night. I got the certifications, the credential that says you are trained to trace money through the ways people hide it. To sit across from a clean folder and a calm liar and find the crack. I moved to a bigger firm. Then to a bank's trust department, then to the work I do now. where the phone rings because an elderly person's money has gone somewhere it shouldn't, and a family that trusted the wrong relative needs someone to go through 4 years of statements and prove exactly what happened, to the dollar. I want you to hear the shape of that. I did not go looking for revenge. I went looking for work I could stand to do, and the work I could stand to do turned out to be the exact skill that would one day let me take my own life apart and see who had really been robbing it. I became, on purpose, and by accident, the only kind of person who could catch Sylvia. And Sylvia had no idea. To her, I was still the tired niece with the box. Gone, handled. I'll tell you the exact moment I understood what I'd become. About a year into the trust department work, a case landed on my desk that I could have written from memory. An old man, dead almost a year. A daughter who'd moved in and given up everything to care for him at the end. A son 2 time zones away who held the power of attorney and the checkbook. So concerned, so practical. A man with a folder. The daughter had been handed a box and told to be out by the end of the month. I sat with her at a conference table while she cried and apologized for crying. And I asked her the only question that ever matters. I said, "Did you keep anything at all with dates on it?" She pulled out a phone full of photographs, every one time-stamped, of her father, of his pill organizer, of the days he knew her and the days he didn't. I looked at those little timestamps, the way you'd look at a rope thrown to you in deep water. I told her, "This is everything. This is the whole case." She didn't believe me until the numbers proved her right in writing, in front of a judge who used the word vindicated out loud. I drove home that night and sat in my car in my own driveway for a long while. Engine off, not moving, because I finally understood that the thing that had happened to me had a name, and a pattern, and a paper trail, and that I had spent 4 years accidentally becoming the one person in the room who could read it. I kept the blue notebooks in a drawer the whole time. I even kept writing in one out of habit for the first year. Little things, appointments, a bad night, before I finally stopped. And I kept Nana's butterscotch tin on my desk at the new job. People thought it was for guests. It wasn't. It was so that every day, before I opened someone else's stolen accounts, I'd see it and remember whose account got stolen first. If this channel has ever made you feel less alone in something you've never said out loud, subscribe. And stay to the end with me, because the end is the part they never think we'll reach. The people like Sylvia count on us being too tired, too ashamed, and too poor to ever open the folder. Let me show you what happens when one of us finally learns how to read it. Now, last spring, almost 4 years after that morning, this is where it turns. And it turns on paper. I got a notice in the mail. A legal notice. The kind that runs in the back of newspapers and gets mailed to interested parties. Nana's estate was finally, 4 years on, moving through probate. That is the court process that settles what a dead person owned and who gets it. And when an estate goes through probate, the law requires the person in charge, the executor, to eventually account for everything, every dollar in, every dollar out, in writing, under oath, to a judge. Here is the thing Sylvia never understood. Because she thought about family and I had learned to think about standing. Standing just means, are you legally allowed to be in this fight? And I had 2 keys. She'd forgotten. She handed me. The first, that personal care agreement. An unpaid contract makes you a creditor. Someone the estate legally owes money to. A creditor is allowed in the door. The second key was even better. Under the version of the trust before her Tuesday amendment, I had been the one named to get the house, which meant I wasn't just some niece with hurt feelings. I was a person the estate might legally owe a house and $73,950. And the law says a person like that gets to demand the numbers. All of them. So I did the most boring, most devastating thing you can do to a person like Sylvia. I did not call her. I did not post about her. I filed a creditor's claim for the unpaid care agreement, and I filed, as an interested party, a formal demand for a full accounting of the estate, calm, compliant, and on the correct forms, by the correct deadline, in the correct court. I borrowed her own favorite weapon. I used the paperwork. And the paperwork forced the folder open. A few weeks later, the estate's accounting arrived. The executor's ledger. The full record Sylvia had been required to produce and swear to. To her, I think, it was a formality. To me, it was the first time in 4 years. I got to do the one thing I am never, ever wrong about. I sat at my kitchen table, and I read it, one page at a time. Let me take you through it the way I read it, because I need you to feel each page land the way it landed on me. Page 1 was the summary. Boring. The estate's value. The house listed as sold. The house on Delrose. The paid-off house. The hummingbird house. The only real thing Nana had left to give anyone. Sold for $312,000, 3 weeks after the funeral. Just like she said, I made myself keep reading. Deeper in came the distributions and the fees, and there it was, in Sylvia's own sworn ledger, in a column she had labeled herself. Management fees and reimbursements. Paid to the trustee. Paid to Sylvia. Over the years she'd controlled Nana's money. She had paid herself. Out of a dying woman's accounts, $106,000. Let me tell you what that number is, so you don't have to do any math. $106,000 is more than everything she ever promised to pay me and never sent. And then that much again, and then more. She found the money to pay herself. She simply never found it to pay me. It was never that the account was complicated. It was that I wasn't on the list of people the account was for, and then, a few pages further in the same folder. 1 page further, that is all. The care agreement. My care agreement. Listed by the estate as a claim, status, disputed, recommended action, deny. She had signed the contract that said the estate owed me $73,950. And then, as the person running the estate, she had written down that the estate should refuse to pay it. She was the one who made the promise and the one who broke it. In 2 different pages of the same book, in the same handwriting, and it got worse the deeper I went, because I hadn't reached the check yet. A few pages further, there it was. The insurance, every one of those daily benefits. $160 a day for the care I gave. Had been collected by the estate across all the years I lived on Delrose. The ledger listed them, honestly enough, as income received, money paid in to reimburse the cost of Nana's care. Care that, according to the very same book, had cost the estate nothing, because the caregiver was never paid. Read that twice. The way I had to. She had collected the reimbursement for my work, and kept the reimbursement, and kept the work, and told me to my face. There was no money. I am not going to give you the exact total the insurer paid over those years, because past a point, the number stops meaning anything, and I won't make you sit here doing arithmetic. I'll tell you what it meant instead. For years, a check arrived every month that was, in plain terms, the wages of the woman writing in the notebook by the toaster. And every month somebody cashed it, and that woman went unpaid, and was then told gently that she shouldn't nickel and dime woman by asking. One page further, the closing, the realtor's settlement statement from the sale of the house. $312,000 for the home on Delrose, less the costs of sale, and then the whole net amount swept into the estate account. And, from there, sent out again. To whom exactly? The ledger was careful not to make simple. Money is easy to hide from someone who skims and impossible to hide from someone who follows it. And following money through the places people route it to lose you is, more or less, my entire job now. So I followed it. It went where it had always gone. It went to the person holding the folder. That is the moment I almost lost it. Not to anger, something quieter and worse, but I still had one page of my own to check. And it wasn't in her folder, it was in my drawer. Stay with me. This is the part I built. My whole new life, without knowing I was building. I went to the drawer, and I got the third blue notebook, the one marked with the year Nana fell. And I turned to that Tuesday, the date printed on the amendment that erased me. The day the lawyer's office swore my grandmother was clear, minded and certain, and rewriting her whole estate. And there, in my own exhausted handwriting from that afternoon, was the truth. Nana did not know my name that day, could not speak, was in and out. At the hospital, a woman who could not say Claire, did not, that same afternoon, knowingly rewrite a trust to hand everything to Sylvia. At her discretion, the two pieces of paper could not both be true, and only one of them had been written by someone who was actually in the room. That is the night I cried, alone, at my own kitchen table, almost 4 years too late, with the butterscotch tin at my elbow and 3 cheap notebooks spread out in front of me. I cried because I finally understood what Ruth had known standing in that kitchen with her farmer's hands. I hadn't kept a chore list. I had kept the only honest record of the last years of my grandmother's life. And without meaning to, without any cleverness at all, I had written down the one date that would prove the whole thing was a lie. I had been carrying the evidence in a drawer for 4 years, thinking it was nothing. It was never nothing. The most honest thing in that house was a 99-cent notebook. And I was the one who kept it. I sat there a long time with the amendment in one hand and the notebook in the other, holding 2 versions of the same afternoon. In one, my grandmother was sharp and certain, and generous to the sister who was never in the house. In the other, written by the woman who was, she couldn't find my name. I kept looking from one to the other, as if one of them might blink. Neither did. Paper doesn't blink. That is the whole reason people like Sylvia use it. And it is the whole reason, in the end, that it can save you. I dried my face. And then I went to work, my real work. The work I am good at, on my own family. Here is where I have to be very clear with you, because it is what separates this from a fantasy. I did not use my job to do this. I never touched Nana's file at the bank. I never pulled a record I wasn't entitled to as a private person. That would have been misconduct, and a person who cheats to win a case like this deserves to lose it. I didn't need to cheat. Everything I used, I had a legal right to as a creditor and an heir. The accounting she was required by law to give me. the amendment she herself handed me on the porch, and the notebooks that were mine. Written by me, about days I lived through. My skill only did one thing. It let me read what everyone else would have skimmed. The law opened the folder. I just knew how to read it. The reckoning happened in a courtroom, and it was the quietest fight you've ever heard. I don't argue. I learned a long time ago that people like Sylvia want you to argue, because a shouting match has no transcript and no exhibits, just two people's feelings. And hers photograph better than mine, so I didn't argue. I informed. Through the process, in the correct order, I laid it out in plain numbered pieces, and I let each one sit before I picked up the next. 1. There is a signed personal care agreement, obligating the estate to pay me $1,450 a month. Here it is. It was never paid. Not once. In 51 months. 2. The estate's own sworn accounting shows that the trustee paid herself $106,000 in fees during the same years, and recommends denying my claim entirely. The money was there. The choice was made. 3. The trust amendment that removed me is dated a day on which my contemporaneous care records, dated, detailed, and made in the ordinary course of caregiving, show that Ada was nonverbal and unable to recognize family. Here is the notebook. Here is the entry. Here is the date, matching the amendment, in my handwriting from that afternoon. 4. I am asking the court for 3 things. A full accounting of every dollar. The trustee to answer personally for the fees she took, and a ruling on whether a woman who could not say my name signed away everything I was promised. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I read the numbers. The way you read numbers when you know they're right. And across the room, for the first time in 4 years, I watched Sylvia's calm start to cost her something. Her lawyer stopped, writing things down. She started to talk about family, about how close she and Nana were, about everything she'd sacrificed. But there was a ledger on the table now, and the ledger was in her handwriting, and it did not care how close they'd been. Paper was the only thing in that room that had actually been there. Ruth was right, to the last inch. At one point, her lawyer tried the only move he had left. He asked me, in that reasonable, sorrowful courtroom voice, whether it wasn't true that I was estranged from my family, whether all of this wasn't really about old hurt feelings. And I said, calmly, that I wasn't there about feelings. I was there about a date. I asked whether his client disputed that the amendment had been signed on that Tuesday. He said, no. I asked whether anyone in the room disputed what my care record said about that Tuesday. That Ada could not speak and did not know her own family. Nobody did. Then there is nothing to argue. I said, there is only what happened. And I sat back down. That was the entire cross-examination. You cannot argue with a date. The date was there that afternoon. They weren't. Here is what the paper did. The court threw out the last amendment. The judge found what my notebook had found. A person who could not recognize her own family on that Tuesday could not have knowingly rewritten her estate on that Tuesday. The amendment was set aside for undue influence and lack of capacity, and the trust that came before it, the one that gave the house on Delrose to me, was restored as Nana's true last competent wish. It came 4 years late, and the house was already sold. But the law is stubborn about this. What was taken has to be traced and returned. The $312,000 didn't vanish just because the house did. The court ordered Sylvia to account for every dollar and then surcharged her. That means the court found she'd breached her duty and ordered her, personally, to repay the estate the fees she'd paid herself, $106,000, out of her own pocket. Back into the estate she'd been looting, and she was removed as trustee and executor. The woman whose whole power came from being the one who held the folder was told, on the record, that she would never hold it again. There was one more thing the paper did, quietly, and I didn't have to lift a finger for it. Once a court sets aside a document for lack of capacity, a trust amendment sworn valid on a day the signer could not speak, questions start getting asked about how it came to be certified as sound in the first place. And by whom? And with whose seal? Those questions don't come to the niece with the notebook. To answer, they go to the professionals who put their names on that Tuesday. I simply made the date impossible to ignore. And the date did the rest. That is the thing about people who live inside procedure. The way Sylvia did. Procedure has two edges. They only ever turned the sharp one toward me. They forgot it cuts both ways, and that one day, someone they'd handed a box to might come back knowing exactly how to hold the handle. And my claim, the disputed, recommended, deny, $73,950 claim, in full. The court's written finding said, in the flat language of the law, what no one in my family had ever once said to my face, that I did the work, that I was owed for it, and that I had been right. I want to be honest about the size of the win, because these stories lie when they make it total. I did not get Nana back. I did not get my 4 years back, or the 2 in the middle where I slept on a couch and rebuilt from a box. I did not get the family back, and I want you to hear that clearly, because if you are waiting for the part where they all realize how wrong they were and we hug, that part isn't coming, and if someone sells you that ending, they're selling you a lie to keep you watching. Half my relatives still think I sued a grieving woman. An uncle I loved won't speak to me. That is the real cost. And I am not going to pretend it away. But Sylvia did the thing they always do after. The thing that finally let all that old anger out of me for good. She escalated. The voicemails started, long ones, then short, furious ones, then long ones again. She showed up once at my building and stood in the lobby until security asked her to leave. And she sent an email, the guilt kind, the kind with no apology anywhere in it, that said, after everything this family did for you, this is who you've become. I did not write back a paragraph. I wrote back one line. The only line I've said to her since. I wrote, I kept the receipts. Then I blocked the number. The voicemails go to a folder now. I have never listened to a single one. And here is the thread I got to keep. My cousin Bree, Sylvia's own daughter, the quiet one who used to hold Nana's hand, testified on her own, without me asking. She told the court plainly that she'd been in that house too, that she'd watched me do everything and watched her mother do the paperwork, and that on the Tuesday in question, her grandmother did not know any of us. She lost most of her family for saying it out loud. She and I have coffee every few weeks now. She is the one person who came out of that house with me. And honestly, she is more than I ever expected to keep. People ask me sometimes what I did with it. In the end, the claim they finally had to pay. The share of the house that came back to me years too late. I didn't buy anything to prove a point. I put most of it away quietly, the way Nana would have, but I did one thing. With some of it, there is a small memorial garden at the hospice where Ruth still works, and I paid for a bench there, with Nana's name on it, and I hung a hummingbird feeder on the post beside it. Bree helped me choose the spot. It is the only monument in this whole story, and Sylvia's name is nowhere on it. And it never will be. So let me end where I started. On that porch, with the box. Sylvia used to say it, like a key that opened any door. This is what Nana wanted. She said it when I signed the agreement she never honored. She said it when she started selling the house out from under me. She said it, foot on a cardboard box, the morning after we buried her. This is what Nana wanted. It turns out she was right. It was what Nana wanted. Nana wanted the girl who stayed to have the house. Nana wanted the woman who did the work to be paid for it. Nana said so, clearly, while she could still say things. It was written down in the trust that came before the lie, in language a court finally read out loud. Sylvia was right. That it mattered what Nana wanted. She was only wrong to think. She was the one who got to decide what that was. For 4 years, no one could tell the difference between what Nana wanted and what Sylvia wanted, because they only had Sylvia's paper. In the end, there was other paper. Mine. A2SO. I still have the blue notebooks, all 3. They sat in a drawer for 4 years being nothing. A chore list, a tired woman's insomnia. The times I gave an old lady her heart pills. I used to be almost embarrassed by them. I am not anymore. That notebook was the record of every hour I gave when no one was counting. Kept by the only person who was there to count it. They tried to write me out of the story with a document signed in a room I wasn't in, and it turned out the truest document in the whole estate was the one I'd been keeping by the toaster the entire time, for free, out of love, about days. That actually happened. The butterscotch tin is still on my desk. I fill it, like she did, like it is a religious duty, and every so often, when a new case comes across my desk, some other tired son or daughter who did all the work and got handed a box, some other calm relative with a clean folder and a story about what the dead really wanted. I open the file, and I find the boring patient, unglamorous thing they always overlook, the receipts, the dates, the paper that was actually there. Ruth told me the ones who weren't in the room will tell the story the loudest. My whole job now is to be the person who reads the quiet paper the loud ones forgot about and makes it speak. If you made it all the way here with me, then you already understand the one thing I'd want you to take from a stranger story. Keep your paper. Write it down, the dates, the dollars. The days they said didn't count, not because you are planning anything. Do it because someday someone may try to tell you that you were never really there, that you were never really owed, that this is what everyone wanted. And when that day comes, the cheapest notebook in the house, kept by the person who actually stayed, will outweigh every lawyer they can buy. They counted on me for everything, and counted me as nothing. So I learned to count. And I made every stolen year add up in a courtroom. To the dollar. That is the whole story. Thank you for staying to the end of it. Take care of the people who show up. And keep your paper.